Yo guys, it's Hart, going to be going over my week 10 core building block plays as well as a recap of week 9. So let's get right into this video. Going to be super quick. Before we get into the video, if you guys just hit that like button and subscribe, do really appreciate it. It really helps out my channel. But recapping week 9, arguably my best week of the year, just in terms of lineup path, advice, kind of who I told you guys to be on. So hopefully you guys had a really, really good week there. But Mac Jones could have been an even better week there for him at 5,000. But unfortunately, Brian Robinson ran in a touchdown there, I think about from roughly the 15, 20 yard. So obviously that could have been a touchdown for either CMC or most likely Mac Jones throwing a touchdown pass, so which obviously would have raised his points there. But he was really solid, obviously eating the chalk there with CMC and common on guy. It just made sense. Puka was solid. Jamison Williams actually had a decent game there. Alec Pierce was really, really good. George Kittle was definitely a letdown, but then Brock Bowers finally got rewarded for playing him. I put him all year. Obviously, he was hurt. Then finally he rested and came back and had a massive game there. So 46 pound there for Brock Bowers, 202 fantasy points. So a really, really good week in terms of the over 200 fantasy points. Let's look to continue it into this week. So in terms of the lineup build for week 10, I think there's a lot of different paths. There's not one clear path. In terms of like the running backs, there's kind of like a top 6. But in terms of quarterbacks, you can kind of go any route you want. There's not like a clear lineup build in terms of the quarterbacks. It's the same thing with kind of the wide receivers. Like it's really just kind of focused on the top running backs. There's about like 6 of them that are super, super chalky. But otherwise, you can kind of go anywhere you want in terms of your lineup build. So in terms of the quarterbacks, I really like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as spend ups. With Josh Allen, obviously you have that risk of that Miami game being a blowout, but still, even in blowouts, it seems like Josh Allen is going to get there. So pretty safe spend up. I think I slightly prefer Lamar Jackson. Just, more likely than not, that game will stay close. So he should have that, really good passing upside, rushing upside with Lamar. But I think they're both fantastic spend ups. I don't mind Stafford. Obviously not in the same tier as those two, but I think the stat is he's thrown 80% of the Rams touchdowns this year have been, through the air, which last year, I think it was like a 60-40 split where, 60% through the air, 40 through the ground. So Kyron Williams had a really good year last year. It seemed like every time they got in the red zone, he would just punch it in. This year, as you can see, the past 5 games, he's really been going off 25 plus, 4 out of the past 5 games there. So it looks to be another really solid matchup there for Stafford going against the 49ers beat-up defense. So he's a good contrarian option. I think Drake May is kind of the same thing. It's one of those situations where playing at MVP level, you got to factor in he's been playing against really, really bad teams. So I don't want to knock him down too much, but you can't really hype him up that much. But still, super efficient. It's just, who do you pair him with? Hunter Henry probably feels like the safest. It's kind of like that Packers situation with Jordan Love where good quarterback, it's just you don't feel great pairing them up with those wide receivers, even though the Patriots wide receivers are pretty cheap right now, just because it's not a guarantee they're going to get the ball like other teams are where, you can go to Stafford, Puka and Devontae Adams are going to see close to 10, if not more than 10 targets in the spot. And, with Drake May, you're not really getting that with Pop Douglas, Mac Hollins, Hunter Henry, you just don't really know. So that's why I think he's just more so a contrarian option. Moving on down more, I'd rather get to Baker, where you can pair him with Taz Johnson, Cade Otton, Rashad White, Emeka Ibuka. Like it's just safer to get to those guys. Caleb Williams once again looks really solid. Now I will mention in this Giants Chicago Bears game, there is a lot of weather risk right now. I think it should be pretty windy in Chicago, possible a ton of rain as well. So keep an eye on that. That might be a pretty gross game there, so that might affect the passing game. It kind of downgrades them a little bit for me, but it still should be one of the most popular games to stack just because, you get a lot of cheap options in the Bears side as well as the Giants side, especially with the passing and rushing upside of these quarterbacks, him and Dart. They're probably going to be, 2 of the kind of top 5 quarterbacks to get to in terms of DFS just because of that upside. I really like Jared Goff here going against Washington. I mean, Washington's been brutal. The only downgrade on Jared Goff is the fact that if they're rolling, usually it's because of Gibbs and Montgomery getting into the end zone, which obviously limits the upside there of Goff being able to reach, 300 passing yards as well as a couple of touchdowns through the air. So I think he's a really strong contrarian option there at 5.9. I really like him in that spot. We know he has 25, 30 plus upside if he throws a couple passing touchdowns, especially against that really, really bad Washington defense. So that looks really good there. Darnold, I think, is a fine option. Dart, as I mentioned with Caleb Williams, great rushing upside. He's been really, really good the past, 4 weeks in terms of just DFS output. So at 5.7, once again, pretty cheap, easy to get to. Brock Purdy is out. Kyler Murray is out. Bryce Young, Mariota, I mean, I think he's a fine contrarian option. Now we're getting to that range where it's like, as I kind of said in the past few weeks, for that Geno Smith range where it's like you can take a shot on these cheaper quarterbacks, and if you get 15, 18, maybe you get 20 fantasy points out of them, it's really going to help you in terms of just spinning up elsewhere. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I think Geno Smith was one of the quarterbacks last week that took down a bunch of tournaments because he went off for 28 fantasy points. So it is viable. You can definitely do it. Like you take a shot on Justin Fields, maybe with the rushing upside. I wouldn't suggest it. I'd rather get to Mariota there. Or you could pay down. Like you can pay down to a guy like Jacoby Brissett, 4.6. As you can see, he's been playing really, really well the past 3 weeks. Now, he's been a career backup the past few years. So I don't know if you should continue to chase that. But still, he's good options. The Cardinals are like a solid team, solidly built. And he's been very valuable the past 3 weeks. So once again, 4.6. Like if you get 15, 18, 20, or even more, which he has been producing the past few games, like that's going to open up a ton of room for you to spin up otherwhere. So he should be a really popular option just because you can pair him with Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr., who looks viable now with Jacoby Brissett after that last game against Dallas. So I think it's a tough matchup. Jacoby Brissett is obviously a backup quarterback, so I'd pump the brakes a little bit, but 4.6, like you guys easily pair him with. And if he gets you 15 fantasy points, closer to 18, 20, it's going to really help out your lineup. So he's definitely a cheap option if you want to get to him there. Same thing kind of with Mills. I'd rather just get to Brissett. Otherwise, I think right now Mac Jones once again is one of my favorite quarterbacks. No rushing upside, but still he has everyone you can want to pair with him. George Kittle, CMC. You can put Juwan Jennings. So very, very cheap. Price tag hasn't moved, and as you can see, he has 20 plus upside. So I really like him once again. But I think for the sake of this video, I really want to go to Lamar, but let's get a little bit different. I'm going to go to Jared Goff. Let's go to Lamar. I was going to go to Jared Goff, but let's go to Lamar. In terms of the running backs, the top 6 running backs, the most popular are going to be CMC, James Cook, Devon Achane, Quinshon Judkins, Kyron Williams will be in that conversation, and then moving on down a little bit more, Travion Henderson. Those are going to be kind of the top backs there for this week 10 slate. So those kind of like top 6, 7 guys. Contrarian guys, I really like Gibbs, obviously, or I don't know if I mentioned Cook there. So CMC, Cook, Achane, those top 3. And then Judkins for, not in order, just kind of the top 6. Williams, and then Henderson are kind of like the top 6 everyone's going to, all the ownership's going to. Obviously, you get CMC. We know the upside there. We know the workload. Say you spend up option. Gibbs, one of the worst games of his career, I think, in terms of just fantasy point output. Obviously, they lost, just did not look great, but still, Gibbs at 8,000. We know the upside there with him. I think he's a really, really strong contrarian option at the top. James Cook in a fantastic matchup against Miami. That makes sense if you want to go there. Same thing with Devon Achane. You just worry if this game gets, if it turns into a blowout pretty fast. Sure, his upside could be limited, but 7.4, he's going to get the rushing attempts. He's going to get the passing attempts. And a game they should be down, so it's a negative game script where it could really work out for him in terms of that receiving upside. I like Derrick Henry. Him and kind of Gibbs are kind of my 2 favorite contrarian options. We know the upside with Derrick Henry, 2 really solid games in a row. Lamar is back, so that really helps him out there in that offense as a whole and just overall the team as a whole. Quinshon Judkins going against the Jets, who are just depleted now after trading some of their defense guys away. He looks really strong, 6.5. It just you'd wish he could get more targets out of the backfield. He's kind of like a Derrick Henry right now, where it's all just rushing upside, but still really good matchup. Moving on down a little bit more, Rico Dowdle was the one I was kind of missing in terms of just really, really good spot, 6.3. I do think we eat the chalk there. Last week they finally kind of gave him that running back one role, 25 attempts, 130 yards. And that was the spot that I told you guys in my video. If you guys watched it, in my core play video, I highlighted him as like a really, really strong contrarian option there against the Packers because the Packers always play down to their opponents. And he had a massive game. I think he was running back 2 on the board in terms of fantasy points there. So I'm going to pat myself on the back there, but I deserve it. And now he's chalk once again. So he looks really, really strong. I think Rachaad White is kind of paired along with Gibbs, and Derrick Henry is kind of my favorite spend up, or kind of my favorite contrarian options if you're not going to get to those chalky guys. Moving on down a little bit more. Manon guy with DeAndre Swift most likely back. They're going to split it like a 50-50 split. I just don't think there's a need to get to either of them. Moving on down a little bit more, I will call out Kenneth Walker that he finally, it doesn't show, but he finally got like the running back one role there in Seattle. I think at 60% of snaps, and Sharps is under 40%. So we can't trust it. It took until week 9 for that to happen for him. But at 5.3, we know his explosive upside. He's kind of like my Rico Dowdle pick, where it's like if I had to pick one guy to have like a huge game there, 15 plus fantasy points, it could be him. Everything's kind of signing up there in terms of like last week's usage. Going into this week against Arizona, solid spot. I think he's worth a dart throw if you're playing a couple lineups, if not, 50, 100 plus lineups. Moving on down a little bit more, I'll call it Woody Marks. We know the upside there. He's kind of that pass catching role, kind of like a mini. He's turned into a little bit of a mini Bucky Irvin slightly in terms of kind of stealing that backfield and just kind of more so that scat back that can run it. He's fine. And then David Montgomery, kind of one of the better cheap options just because of the really poor defense there for the Commanders, the explosive ability for the Lions to score, and just the overall game script. They should be up. When they're up, they usually ground and pound it with him in the second half more than Gibbs, just because Gibbs is a little bit more fragile. So those are kind of the running back plays, running back options. I don't think we need to get to anyone too cheap there. So Gibbs, Monty, the best really cheap low option. He should have some decent ownership. Moving up a little bit more, Walker, kind of more so that that dart throw play is kind of my favorite dart throw play for running backs. But I think you kind of stick with the top 6 guys: Rico, CMC, Cook, Achane, Judkins, and then if you want to get different, if you're building a ton of lineups, sure, but I think you just stick with the top 6 and then go from there. So to fill out this lineup, we will throw in I think right now I think we'll just go to Achane there, just so we can get a piece from that side of that game. Actually, I'm going to go to Cook. Wide receiver situation, obviously the top 3. You can't go wrong there. All 3 look fantastic. I'd rank it just like how they're priced. That's kind of my ranking there. Jefferson, more so contrarian option there. I just don't really trust JJ right now. Yeah, he's fine. Don't like the price tag on Devontae. With Puka back, Ibuka looks really strong there as the number 1 option for the Bucs. Nico's with Davis Mills actually looked viable. Tied for the most targets of the season there with Davis Mills. So it looks like Davis is just going to chuck on the ball, which you like. I think Waddle is a really strong option, especially if you're not going to get to Devon Achane. If they could keep that game close, it's him and Devon and Waddle are the 2 only guys on the offense. They're going to get the ball there. So that he looks really strong. Moving on down a little bit more. Rome, especially if you're going to, Caleb Williams. I think Rome is strong. I know he's coming off a game where he had 0 targets and 0 catches, but still he has really good upside. Obviously, you're going to Lamar. We're going to pair him with Zay Flowers there. Moving on down a little bit more, I do like, Deebo Samuel as kind of a bring back option. I think he's interesting. Rondell Robinson, he'll be a really strong option at 5.3. Harrison Jr. is solid. Khalil Shakir, okay. Jameson Williams, once again, I think is firmly in play. Moving on down a little bit more, Parker Washington should act as the wide receiver 1 there for the Jaguars. He's another one of those kind of the cheap value options. I called it last week. Had a really strong game there, 17 fantasy points. Moving on down a little bit more here, Tez Johnson. If you're not going to get to Ibuka or Rashad White, I think he makes sense. He has shown some explosive big playability. Darius Slayton, I think, is a fine tournament option. Sterling Shepard, kind of the same thing there. Pop Douglas will get some ownership. His explosive playability. It's just one of those things. Can you trust him getting that upside there with Drake May throwing the ball? It's just Drake May throws it, spreads it out. And I will call it Zacchaeus. Luther Burden is back, so I expect the usage to go down a little bit. But he had another really good game there. Called that out as a good, solid value option. And then moving to the tight ends, Trey McBride, if you want to spend up for him, he looks good. I, once again, really like going to George Kittle, even though he's coming off a pretty poor game there. Moving on down a little bit more, Kincaid, viable. Don't mind it. If Fannin Jr. is out, Njoku would be a really, really strong play. I think Colston Loveland is a strong play. Cade Otton, I'll call him out. With him, the kind of the wide receivers being depleted, he's always firmly in play there. Hunter Henry, if you want to stack him with Drake May, I don't mind it. Njoku, as I said, if there is no Fannin Jr., he looks really strong. If Barner is out, I don't mind taking a shot on Arroyo. there at 2,600. Like he'd be the guy to fill in. He's already getting a good amount of run, even with Barner in there. So that's an interesting spot there. Pretty cheap at 2.6. I'd like that. I like it likely, paired him with Lamar Jackson. I think that's a strong play. 2,900. It's been back for a few games, but obviously they had Cooper Rush. The offense wasn't good. So with Lamar Jackson back, I really like the upside there for likely in that spot. 2.9 is a really, really cheap price tag to get to a guy who has, 10, 15 plus upside there, even with Mark Andrews in. I think that's everything for now. I feel like I'm missing. Greg Dulcich is a guy I'll mention. Kind of that third guy who's going to get the ball there. Came in, saw 5 targets, 5 catches there for Miami. Game they should be down, so that could be an option. And then for defense, I like paying up. Another one of the situations I don't mind paying up. I think the Lions look really good there. Seahawks, I don't mind getting the Seahawks. They've been really, really strong there. I know Jacoby Brissett's been playing well, but still, he's a career backup. I just think it's going to be one of those games coming where he goes out there, gets you 10 fantasy points or less because he does really bad. He was starting to do that a little bit in that Seattle game, or in that Cowboys game, but he ended up turning it on, being fine. But I think we're going to pay down, and we're going to get to the Texans here, going against Trevor Lawrence. Really, really strong defense. Lawrence has been bad. 3.1 is a really, really strong price tag. And to fill out this lineup here, let's just get to a few other plays. I want to get to at least one of these top kind of wide receivers. So I think I'm going to get to Amon-Ra, especially if I'm not going to get to Gibbs in this lineup. I think I want to get to Amon-Ra there. 4.5 left over here. Let's see who we can get to. Paying on down a little bit more. I don't mind getting to Parker Washington there, even though it's going against the Texans defense. I don't mind that. It's kind of the wide receiver one there for the Jaguars. I think Thomas Jr. is out. Yeah. Just wanted to confirm that. And then moving on down a little bit more to fill out this lineup here for you guys. End up turning into a longer video. I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be quick, but more people I want to talk about than I thought. I think we'll just finish with Wandow here. Just because 5.3, even if it's really crappy weather, his ADOT is like 5 yards. So he should be getting everything at the 5-yard mark or even near the line of scrimmage. Going to get peppered with targets is the wide receiver one there for the Giants. So I really like him there. Can finish out the lineup here. I think it's a fine, kind of core play look. In terms of like the core plays, this is who I'd go to. For the core plays, I'm going to go to this. Lamar, pair him with Zay, you got Rico, you got James Cook, you got the Texans defense, and then from there you 5.1 left over to spend. And as I said, like I'd either pay up for one of the top wide receivers or get to like CMC there, maybe Gibbs as the kind of the top backs in terms of pay up options. So hope you guys like the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.